On this episode of Dark File Network, we open a case that still unsettles investigators, psychologists, and communities across America. It is not just a story of crime, it is a story of silence, missed warnings, and the terrifying normality of evil. In the summer of 1991, the city of Milwaukee moved through its ordinary routines. Cars passed through humid streets. Neighbors exchanged small talk. No one imagined that inside a modest apartment building, one of the most disturbing criminal cases in American history was about to be exposed. This is the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, the man no one noticed, born in 1960 in Milwaukee and raised in Bath. Dahmer did not stand out as a future headline. Former classmates described him as quiet, awkward, sometimes withdrawn. He drifted through life, struggling with isolation and addiction. But beneath that ordinary exterior, something far darker was forming. By the late 1980s, young men, many from vulnerable communities, began disappearing. Witnesses would later recall seeing them in the company of a polite man offering money for photographs or drinks. Few realized they were being led into apartment 213. Inside apartment 230, neighbors complained about a strange smell. Management issued warnings. Police even visited the property more than once. Yet the truth remained hidden. Inside the apartment, Dahmer documented and preserved evidence of his crimes. He spoke later of a desire to create companions who would never leave him. A chilling reflection of obsession and control rather than impulsive violence. The horror unfolded over 13 years, until one night changed everything. The escape that broke the caisson. The 22nd of July, 1991, Tracy Edwards escaped from the apartment, handcuffed and terrified. He flagged down police officers and told them something was terribly wrong. When officers returned with him and opened a drawer, they found photographs, graphic proof that transformed suspicion into certainty within seconds. By the end of the investigation, 17 young men were confirmed murdered between 1978 and 1991. The trial and the shockwave in 1992, the courtroom became the center of national attention. Dahmer spoke calmly, almost clinically. Families of victims faced him with grief and fury that filled the room heavier than any sentence. He received 15 consecutive life terms, but the story took another turn in 1994. While serving his sentence at Columbia Correctional Institution, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate. Some called it justice. Others called it another act of violence in the cycle that had already taken too much. The real twist for Dark File Network. The most disturbing element is not only what Dahmer did, but what was missed. Police had returned a bleeding teenage boy to Dahmer's apartment months before the final arrest, believing it was a domestic dispute. Complaints about smells and behavior were dismissed as minor issues. The tragedy exposes more than one man's crimes. It reveals institutional failures, overlooked warnings, and the cost of ignoring vulnerable voices. The shadow that remains today, decades later. The case still raises uncomfortable questions. How does someone hide such horror in plain sight? How many warning signs were there, and how many lives might have been saved? At Dark File Network, we do not tell these stories to glorify killers. We tell them to remember the victims, to examine the systems that failed, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil does not always look frightening. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Apartment 213 is long empty, but its shadow still lingers, and that is why this file remains open in the dark archives of history.